Sam Markilly. We farm in between Wisbeach and Kings Lynn. We're a 1,000-hectare arable unit. The guru for the yen competition was Gallant. We probably have 30% of our wheat area is Gallant. Our approach to our yen plot for milling wheat was really just representing what we more or less do on the whole farm, but with one or two tweaks. For the quality side, we always have to go for yield, and quality sort of comes along with it. Our yields this year were pretty disastrous, second wheats, well below our 5-year average, with first wheats doing very well. Sulphur we generally put on early, put about 60 kilograms a hectare in March, as and when conditions allow. Quite a tricky year for our spray program. I think it was fairly low disease pressure, very dry, but I still think we invested in the crop to try and protect ourselves against any sort of late development of diseases. I think growing milling wheat, it's quite a risky strategy not to put the inputs in, even in low disease years. So we went from very dry, end of March, April, May, June, to extreme wet. Harvest this year was very tricky, typical English weather, so as soon as we wanted to go out combining, we had a lot of thunderstorms. Our approach to storing milling wheat is, as soon as it's ripe, getting it in as quick as we can, drying it as quick as we can, and then obviously cooling afterwards. We use the merchant trade to sell onto the millers. I do hedge. It's probably the most important part of our job, really, is to market and sell our crops at the correct time.
I'm Will Machin, I'm a farm manager at New Farm Weald in West Oxfordshire. We farm 1,100 hectares, all arable, rotation of winter wheat, spring barley, winter barley and oilseed rape. The yen plot we had this year was on a contract farm in a 5-hectare field. It's limestone brashy with some clay loam on the top. We started by using a heli disc cultivator similar to a top-down. We cultivated it in middle of August, sprayed it off middle of September, drilled about the 21st of September, and then with a Vardastat rapid drill, and then Cambridge rolled afterwards. We applied a total of 260 kilos of nitrogen. That included the first dose at the middle of March of ammonium sulfate. That gave about 30 kilos of nitrogen, 90 kilos of SO3, then had 2 doses of urea and a 40 kilogram top-up of Newfol. Our fungicide program was a 4-spray program. We had a T0 of CTL and 2 triazoles, followed by a T1 of an SDHI and CTL, T1.5, 2 weeks after the T1 of straight CTL, again with a bit of tebuconazole, T2 another SDHI, and a T3 of prothioconazole and some tebuconazole. Harvest was probably a week later than we anticipated. Spring barley seemed to take priority, but when we got to the plot, unfortunately some of it was lodged. It lodged end of June in the strong winds. The plot seemed to yield okay, and the grain quality looked very promising. Skyfall was stored on floor on a concrete store with pedestals. It was dried from 16.5%. We market the crop through our local merchant, and they decide which end user it will go to.
I'm Tom Paybody. I farm here in Madewell in Northamptonshire. We're a mixed farming operation, lambing at 860 ewes and contract shepherding. On the arable side of things, our own and various contract farming agreements and tenancies, we're covering about 4,000 acres of arable cropping. Predominant soil types are sort of heavy Denchworth series and Hanslope series clays. Our typical rotation has changed, like many in this area, over the last few years. We're growing wheat, oilseed rape, spring barley, spring beans predominantly, with some winter barley occasionally. Our yen plot was a field of Crusoe wheat grown for Warburtons under contract through Open Field. It was wheat following spring beans, which yielded 11.3 tonnes a hectare. We routinely apply sulphur with the first application of nitrogen, almost as sort of soon as the crop picks up a way out of the winter. This particular crop then had a further 3 splits of ammonium nitrate, with the last split going on sort of in late May on a fully expanded flag leaf. So we used a 4-spray fungicide program using triazole, strobilurins and SDHIs. We used Aviator at T1 and Elatacera at T2. So our T3 application also had rust in mind when we used a strobilurin azoxystrobin alongside the Aureus P for fusarium. So the harvest for us wasn't quite as wet as others in other parts of the country. Our wheats weren't actually fully mature. Thankfully, we managed to hold on to Hagberg on all our quality wheats. The block of Crusoe was harvested at 17% moisture, so it hasn't taken a lot of drying on the drying floor back at. Our crop storage is back at Mill Farm at Madewell predominantly, which consists almost totally of drying floors. Crops are stirred and blown with dried air until dry, and then cooled predominantly for long-term storage.